Hello, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening for where you're ever turning into today. My name is Austin Braham. I am the AI evangelist at EverWorker, and I have the privilege of sitting down with my colleague today, Doug Weatherbee, and to talk all things about AI education. But before we kind of jump in, Doug, would you mind giving just a brief introduction for everybody?
Sure, Austin. Thank you. So as Austin said, I'm Doug Weatherbee. I think it shows up at the bottom of my little window here. I'm head of education here at EverWorker. I've been in tech education now since 2000, doing a whole bunch of stuff in a variety of different technologies. And yeah, super interested and excited about having this conversation today with Austin. So
Perfect. Well, we'll jump straight in. There's just a few housekeeping rules, I guess, or guidelines for everyone today, as we want this to be as interactive as possible. So for anyone that is interested in commenting or chatting or basically asking questions, in whatever way you want to interact, please feel free to wherever you're watching this. Like if it's on LinkedIn, throw it in the comments because there's no chat feature. But then if you're on YouTube, you can chat, things like that. We want to hear from you all, for you all to be a part of this as much as we can, because this ultimately is for you. So from here, we'll jump straight into, let's go back to the agenda here for today. We're going to start off with going over the importance of AI education. Where are things going on right now? What are we seeing in the market? And then we'll jump straight into actually what Doug has prepared for us on how to truly become future-proof with how you can start to think about implementing AI both into your life and into your work in a systematic approach on how you can do so. And then we'll go into actually introducing you to who are we at EverWorker, so you know a little bit more about us. And then we'll go over our free certification course that we have for everyone, as well as some Q&A. But first things first, let's jump into actually right here. I'll take this off for a real second with us, Doug. I want to get your opinion on the general state right now of AI education. There's a lot going on in obviously the whole entire market, the world basically, where people are starting to realize that AI is here and is here to stay. It's not just some fad. And on one hand, you're hearing this is all doom and gloom. Everyone's basically going to lose their job. There's no helping this, blah, blah, blah. But then there's also the whole idea of, okay, I know I need to do something about this right now. Where would you say we are right now in the world of AI education? And how can people initially start to even think about the importance of AI education?
yeah, there's a lot there. We could have a multi-hour conversation on that. I think you framed it really well, though. At this point, it wasn't clear, 10 to 12 months ago where this was all going. It was terribly exciting, but it wasn't kind of clear, I think, the way it is now, which is that all companies have to sort of deal with AI, generative AI and agentic solutions or augmentation or automation of various parts of their business. Like that's happening. Companies are at various stages along that road, and I think individuals are also sort of at various stages or phases along that road as well. And the thing that makes this, so we know the need is there. We know it's there personally, and we know it's there for our businesses. And the thing that makes this challenging, as I mentioned in my introduction, I've been in tech education now since 2000. And I was actually doing business process analysis during the 90s, which led into my tech career, which I'll actually come back and talk about because I think that's an essential skill that's being revised. And that's part of what I want to focus on today. But the thing that I haven't seen is how fast things are moving. And right now, like literally week by week, you and I talked about this a few months ago, even when we had an initial conversation about AI education, is that in a time of technological transformation or disruption, there's an enormous amount to learn. I have not seen this type of pace of technological transformation in my 25 years of teaching. So it's it is a critical moment, I think, for individuals out there to think about, well, what do they do? I mean, if you are, a year or two away from retiring, that's one thing. But if you are going to be in the workforce for the next 10 or 15 years, we're going to be living with AI in some shape or form. And so I think the key thing you want to be able to do is to become as AI fluent in a big sense, become as AI fluent as you can, because that's going to enable you to work with the evolution of your own job role, but the way your business is going to evolve, the way the technologies that you use today are going to evolve. We don't know exactly how this is all going to play out, but the more information, the more knowledge, the more skills that you have that you can bring to your own work and your own companies, the more valuable you're going to be, the more value you bring in the face of all this digital transformation. So I think that's a key thing that I would say. It's like the big picture view. A number of us have lived through, different waves of technological transformation. This one is massive. I mean, I have never seen one like this. With technological transformation, there are all kinds of new things to learn, and there are all kinds of new ways that business is going to function given the digital transformation or the technological transformation that occurs. And we want to be there to play a part in that. We want to have some valuable contribution to that, that sort of transformation. So that's sort of the big picture, I think, is that it's daunting. It's like, where do you start? I think that's what we're trying to do here at EverWorker, is we're trying to cut through the noise and see what's a signal for you. If you're a business professional, you're not a coder, you're trying to grapple with this new world. What's the path that you can take to sort of incrementally build up those skills that I described a minute ago? So I think that's it.
Yeah. I feel like one of the things that we're I know you and I have talked about it before. There's plenty of even like studies that are coming out along the same lines of the idea of there is a definite difference going on right now with the younger generation specifically, because a lot of these automations and, especially now with AI agents, things like that, people saying that there's less need for, let's say, low skill, but then also low amount of time from a job. So if you're like a beginner developer, now oftentimes people are saying, oh, well, let me just go to Cursor, or let me go to like Windsurf or these other ones, instead of hiring a junior developer, basically. Yeah. So the importance of both on the young end of you're just getting into the job market, there is obviously, like you said, more time that you're going to have to prepare for for the most part. But at the same time, there's the other end of things as well, where you're approaching maybe not the end of your actual career, but for the most part, you're somewhere in between, closer to the end. The importance of implementing AI in a time where, just like how we saw during digital transformation, as well as just our cultural transformation when cell phones came out and email came out, and there are still people that are hesitant towards using cell phones and using the internet. So basically, the importance becomes now, how can I think about implementing this? What are the steps to follow? Because as other people have seen, I've interviewed Peter, our CEO, multiple times now, and one of the things that he always says as the place to start is with AI education. And then what you have done is you've actually kind of made this into a systematic approach of follow these steps on which you can actually do that and start, because a lot of people, like you said, don't know where to start. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love for you to break down your methodology, and we can talk all through exactly what you have kind of put together here. So I'll bring up your slides for you to talk them through. Yeah,
thanks, Austin. And maybe what I'll do is I'll give a little context. I'll add on a bit more about my background that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Like I said, I've been in tech training now since 2000, a range of different technologies that I've been involved in teaching and building curriculum for and all that kind of stuff. Prior to that, in the 90s, I was a business analyst. I'm Canadian. I try to keep my A's to a minimum in my conversation. But I worked in Ontario, in Toronto, for a number of years in a range of different positions. For a number of years, I was actually in the Ontario government setting up brand new programs, designing business processes from scratch, like having to envision what a certain, program would look like. What are the sequential steps? What are the inputs that a certain, sort of workflow needs to have? What are the outputs? All the different characteristics of what a business process looks like. And then I came out of that work. I actually then worked with a lot of tech people. And then, at some point I was like, I should just go do tech. And I did do tech in the late 90s in terms of my education, and came out of that. And then actually was teaching a lot of tech, but teaching also designing of systems as well as technological, like how does one code or how does one implement or administer certain systems. There are a whole bunch of processes that are in sort of software development. In the early days, it was called rational unified process. There's object-oriented programming, analysis, and design. There's all these different techniques about how one designs software from what a business analyst or a business process person would envision the business workflows are. Now, the reason why I say that is it feels like some of those skills have been dwindling over the last decade, 10 to 15 years. Those skills to be able to understand clearly what a business process is. Doesn't mean they're all gone, but they're certainly not as thick in the world, let's say, as they were back in the early 2000s or the late 1990s. And in some ways, they were too much in the world of business and in the world of software development back then. Like we overdid it. So there was this pendulum swing where we kind of slid away from it. But now with AI, generative AI and agentic systems, I think there's a real need for us to go back to some of the fundamentals of how we think about, identify, understand the work that each of us does in a company. What are the tasks, the workflow tasks that I do as an HR specialist, as a sales rep specialist, as a marketing specialist, as a legal specialist within an organization? How do I define systematically, understand and define systematically what I do? Because if you can do that, that's huge right now. A lot of people are having a hard time understanding, I know this AI thing is out there. Here's what I do in my world, but I don't know how to bridge. I don't know how to construct a bridge that gets me from what I do to what AI is doing so that I can articulate and bring value to this new emerging world of AI that's going to exist within my job. So what I have done, and this is just preliminary, is I try to distill and make it easy for people without getting, you can go, business process modeling is a whole discipline in and of itself. And it's extremely complicated. There's actually business process modeling languages and all these crazy things that people who are deep in that world do. What we need to do is figure out, like, what's the easy first steps that we can do as, subject matter experts, as HR people, as sales people, as legal people, as operations people within a company. So that's what I'm doing right here. And in this particular slide, I'm going to go through what I hope to be, like you were saying a minute ago, hope to be sort of like a little bit of a systematic approach about how you would define your business processes, the things that you do. So that's essentially a lead up to what I'm doing. So, and I'll try, I want to have a conversation with you too. Please interject, Austin, at any point in here.
Okay.
But, the idea here is, just trying to frame it. And I think I did that before a little bit with what I've been saying, what you and I've been talking about. But, the big thing is like all of us, Austin, you, I do, we all have all this specific domain knowledge about what, you have knowledge about what you do as an evangelist. I have knowledge about what I do as an educator. These are all this is gold. This is what makes us unique, but also what makes our company potentially unique and have some competitive advantage or some unique differentiator in the marketplace. Each one of us carries that potential in terms of the knowledges and the practices and the things that we accomplish in our business. Right. And so how we actually write this down in some way that gets us closer to understanding how we could potentially leverage AI to help us with those processes is really the business challenge that I'm throwing out.
Yeah, yep. I've seen that same thing. I feel like one of the things I often people talk to me about, or I've even noticed just watching people, is that first point of like they don't know where they can even use AI in the first place when it's actually, you know, a step-by-step thing that you could follow. So I'm seeing that all over the place. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's completely understandable. Number one, I mean, whenever there's a radically new technology that is driving a transformation, we all have questions. What does it mean for me? What does it mean for my business? Where do I start? All that. It's completely understandable. And so the question is then, how do we then start making those first little steps? What are the first little steps towards, you know, bridging, again, that gap between where we are in understanding and what the world is sort of bringing to us, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm laying out here as a challenge. One of the ways, this was one of the, again, lots of, you know, business modeling, business process modeling and all that. There's a huge discipline out there. There's language, there's methodologies, there's papers, there's all these kinds of, you know, software and so forth that sort of envelops what that world is. But I'll tell you, one of the things that we did as business process analysts back in the 90s was we used the 5 W's and H framework, which came out of journalism. You know, it's a very classic, it's a methodology that gets you starting to think. It just, you're going to ask questions of yourself or ask questions of a colleague. And through these questions, you actually start, you know, beginning to identify or surface things that is the gold, is the field of business processes that you and or your colleagues work in. So if you can see here, I mean, it's pretty easy, right? It's like, who was involved in whatever you do or whatever your colleague does, right? You know, so this will identify things like key people, stakeholders, perhaps even decision makers, you know, within this space or world that you work in. You know, what happened can start to identify things like tasks that you're engaging in. What about deliverables, you know, that you have to produce? You know, what happened? What came out of something? Where did it happen? Well, that starts to identify different systems that you may use within your company. Maybe it has to do with email scheduling. Maybe it has to do with a customer relations management system, right? But it says, where is this stuff that you're doing? Where does it take place? What tools do you use? What systems do you use within your company? When did it happen is a really interesting one, because if you think about when starts to identify potentially sequences. This has to be done before this next thing, which has to be done before this next thing, right? So you start to get a bit of a sequence occurring. Then you look at, well, why did it happen? That starts to give you a big picture. You know, well, hopefully you have some kind of business objectives. It's a revenue generator. It's protecting you against, you know, risks that you see. There's some why behind it, which starts to surface, again, some of the motivation around what you're doing. The last one's super interesting, somewhat related a little bit to when in some ways, but how. If you ask yourself, how did this happen? Then you start to articulate potentially methods, decision-making methods, procedures. You know, again, it's related somewhat to sequences, but you start articulating them a little bit more concretely, right? So this right here is just a really easy way to get going. It's something that you can just use over and over again, right? And you can do that with yourself. You can do that with colleagues, etc. Is this making sense?
Yeah, this is exactly what you would think of normally. I feel like this would be like you've mentioned. This is normal to a human.
Yes.
And almost like, you know, self-evident as a human to answer these questions. And at least you should know all of these about your role and what you're trying to do and all of this, where kind of like what we've often talked about is that idea of like, if you can explain it to a junior member on your team,
Yep.
which all of us have to do, like, as you know, onboarding new team members, you're trying to bring someone else onto a project of yours, you have to explain what it is. This is exactly what you would do. So it'd be no different than with AI.
That's it. And it's just, what it does is this gives you kind of a structure that you can pour yourself into. So you're not just staring at a blank page, you know, if you're going to explain to a junior person joining your team, or you're going to try to identify how can AI help me with any of these things. Staring at a blank screen or a blank page is really daunting. So if you start out and you just say, well, just ask yourself these questions and brainstorm out who was involved, you know, and you can actually go through this a few times. You can go through it, you know, these questions once and get down your initial thoughts, and you can go back and add more information to it to sort of embellish and enhance what your descriptions are. Key thing is you use this as a kind of like a framework. It gets you rolling. And if you think about some of these questions, some of them are really interesting when it comes to sort of thinking about like a workflow or a series of tasks that comprise a workflow. If you think about what happened, where, when, and how, these ones in particular on the right, they can surface, this is critical, is a step-by-step, you know, this step A has to happen in order for step B to happen, in order for step C to happen, right? And then it also starts to surface what the inputs are, and then also what the outputs or the deliverables are, right here. And you might even have some places in there where you have handoffs. We all do this, where we're producing something, gets handed off to a completely different department.
Yep.
Right? So all these things are gold. This is what you want to systematically start documenting. And so what I did here is I said, okay, let's take an example of just some role and let's apply this technique, you know, and work through what this would look like. So I thought, well, you know, let's do like a sales rep. Most of us would understand, you know, generally, even if we're not doing sales rep ourselves, if we're in a company and we're trying to make money, we're somehow involved, even tangentially, with what sales is doing. So we have an understanding. But so that gives us a sort of a common way to sort of look at this. So if we think about like a sales rep, you know, who would they be involved with? Like who are they interacting with? Well, they're interacting with prospects, with existing customers, maybe with the sales team, with marketing. So you start to get a little bit of a picture. What are they doing? Well, they deal with lead scores, critical, right? They need to have lead scores on you know, prospects that they're dealing with. What is the qualification for sales? You know, what is the criteria that they have to run against when they're out there, you know, digging around trying to find new leads? What are conversation outcomes? These are the things that they are producing or dealing with in their work. Where do they work? Well, critically, a CRM, HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever. Choose your you know, your tool, your system. They're also going to be potentially with phone, you know, dealing with phone calls, emails, you know, video conferencing. They may be industry events, things like that. You know, just, you know, you can imagine this is the tip of the iceberg, right? Like what I'm doing here is saying there's a lot of narrative that we could build under each one of these questions, but you get an idea of what we're doing. You know, when are they dealing with things? Well, they'll have the initial contact, right? They identify a lead, they have the initial contact. They may have follow-up sequences with assessments. There may be some kind of reviews that they're dealing with that are quarterly. So we start to map out some of the places or time frames in which they interact as they do their work. Then why do they do this? Well, they're trying to make money for the company, right? Build long-term relationships. And then how? Well, how is really interesting because, again, it starts to get into, they might have you know, usually for a good sales rep org, we're not going to go out there and each sales rep does their own thing. We're going to have a playbook for sales. We're going to have a series of questions that are discovery questions. So we get a systematic approach to you know, the discovery of new leads. When a customer is going to make some objections, how do we handle those objections? Competitive analysis, things like that, right? So you see these things start to get filled out with how. Is this making sense so far, Austin?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it is following those step-by-step plans basically on how to accomplish a job in the first
Yeah.
place. So absolutely.
Yeah. And so now, again, imagine what I've done here is this is like a tip of the iceberg, because we could sit down and do this over a couple of hours.
Yep.
And there would be a rich narrative text, several paragraphs potentially under each one of these questions, right? Which is gold. That's gold for us, right? You know, so when we do that, what we can do is, if you think about the what is question, what is it? You know, we had from the previous one that sales rep is dealing with lead scores, qualification criteria, and outcomes. These are strong pointers to actually processes. Processes produce lead scores. And in this case, we could call it a lead qualification process. So all of a sudden we're reifying. We're saying, okay, whatever this deliverable is, all of a sudden it points to the potential name, or at least the headline description of what, there is a process that creates a lead score. What is that? Right? So what we'll do is let's take that lead score qualification process and let's keep going. So then what we want to do is go back and say, underneath the when and the how did it happen, often those somewhere in that narrative paragraph, you know, multiple paragraphs that we have underneath each of these questions, there's actually going to be process steps that we have somehow dumped in the middle of a sentence. So our job is to go through and literally comb through those paragraphs and look for I think that's a step. We don't care about what order at this point. Don't worry about what order they are. Just look for things like, if we're producing lead scores and we have a lead qualification process, what are the steps involved that get us to the output lead score?
Yep.
It's all we're doing at this point. Just grabbing those. Once we have those process steps in a candidate list, so to speak, order them. Then go back and say, now, does this one come before this one, or does this one have to follow? You know what, right? Order the steps. Just order them, just like that. When you order them, you've got the makings of a diagram. So now we're just like taking the order. First, we have an initial contact. We have a basic qualification assessment. We do discovery scheduling. We do a needs assessment execution against the prospect. We then come out with a qualification score, which then drives us to a handoff decision. Is this somebody that is a potential prospect that needs to move on in our sales pipeline? Or is it somebody that we can rule out for now?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, this is huge from where we were. Think about it. Like, we started this process this morning, let's say a few hours ago. And now all of a sudden we're into a flow diagram of a particular process that we or our colleagues engage in. Now we can build on this. This is where it gets super interesting. So we think about, okay, we have ordered steps. Now let's think about, what are the inputs? Again, we go back to our narrative, our questions, and we dig through. We ask, what are the inputs that we need to feed into that flow? So we need lead source and contact information, maybe company profile, as we're doing an assessment or an evaluation of that lead. What are the initial indicators? Maybe they joined a webinar like what we're doing today. Do we have that signal? What about the budget and timeline? That will drive potentially, what this individual is doing in terms of a sequence or deadlines. What is it? What does the workflow have to be contained within in terms of time? And then what kind of decision-making stuff exists in there? And once we have these inputs, we add them to the diagram, right? And now we're starting to build this really interesting kind of view of what this business process that we engage in, or our colleagues, if we're helping a colleague articulate this process, looks like. Now, the next part of this, we've got our inputs, we've got our steps in the flow, would be like, hey, what about the outputs? What are the deliverables? Just list them, right? We want to have a lead score. Obviously, this is a lead qualification process. So its ultimate is to get qualified lead scores.
Right.
But there may be next action recommendations. There's going to be updates to our HubSpot or our Salesforce. There's going to be potentially calendar scheduling. Hey, I've got a book with this prospect for 2 days from now. What about nurture email sequences, things like that, handoff documentation, all that kind of stuff are formalized sort of outputs that come out of this process. And what do we want to do? We want to add that to the diagram. Now, if we look at this diagram right here, this describes the world of humans within the sales rep org that are engaged in doing lead qualification. Right? This is what the human work looks like. Right?
Right.
So at this point, huge, right? Like this is huge. We're at a point where we can start asking questions about how can AI, generative AI and agentic AI, be helpful to this process?
Right.
Right now, this is all human. So then we say, like, how can they be helpful? So the way I like to think about it is that first we could think of how could AI help us with thinking tasks somewhere in this process? So you can say like cognitive tasks or thinking tasks. Sometimes people call it reasoning. Doesn't really matter. Thing is, it's like we're sitting here and we're saying, we have to do some company research and analysis, and we all know that can take some time. Mm-hmm. Could I ask AI to be doing some research on a prospect's company, coming out with any trends that apply to that company? What's a competitive landscape? Who would be our competitors competing for that same prospect or potential customer within that company? AI is really good at that. It's also really good potentially at lead scoring. If we give it a very descriptive set of essentially rules, it can take whatever our criteria is and apply that across all leads.
Yep.
It may be able to help us with meeting preparation. I'm going to meet with that prospect again in 2 days. Can AI help me do some prep? It's done some research on this individual, on their company, on the competitive landscape. All that reporting comes back to me as a prep document for that meeting. And then potentially it may suggest outcomes, recommendations from any follow-ups that I need to do with a prospect or even an existing customer that I want to expand in. Is this making sense so far?
Yeah, I was actually literally just thinking about how this is one thing that I've even done maybe in the beginning of my journey with AI, and I've encouraged people to do so as well, is what you're also getting at here is that AI can help you with certain decision making and help you come to a conclusion, the best conclusion, whatever it is. You can even like give all of this to AI and say, here's my steps, blah, 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 blah. Here's what I'm looking for, inputs, outputs, and then have it also help you figure out where it could help. There's like, it can, once
Absolutely.
You start to realize in some ways where it could help, it's a snowball that just keeps growing from there. Cause then you keep using it.
Absolutely. It's like thinking. So once you identify the process and you've clearly, like going back a couple of slides, like once you have this, you say, okay, this is what I, as a human, or maybe 2 or 3 of us as colleagues within this business do. We execute this. So then the question is, AI is there and has incredible skills, generative skills. It becomes our research, our reasoning, our thinking partner, our analysis partner, right? And that's what we're doing. We're calling out here saying, let's think about that. Like what can we do within that process? What things can we ask AI to help us with, to analyze, to think through, exactly. Right? Exactly. And when we list them like this, see, it's important that we want to list them. So we're not just sitting here and we're going, well, I know it can do these things, but we actually list them the way I've done it right here. The reason why we want to list them is that we want to add them to the diagram. And now we don't need to be exact. We're doing our best job here at this point of trying to sort of plot those AI cognitive, AI cognitive kind of like, assistance where we think it's relevant to some step some step within the process, right? So I'm saying, oh, company research and analysis. Well, that's the basic qualification assessment. Is this the right prospect for me to go after? based on the company analysis and the competitive landscape and all that kind of stuff. Well, I think it is. It comes back. Yeah, wow, I look at the report from AI. Wow, okay, this is somebody that I should be talking with. Okay, well then how do I prepare a meeting? What do I do to for that first meeting prep? I do that before I'm going to be scheduling a conversation, hopefully with them. When I get through the execution of the assessment, I'm going, well, qualification scoring. Remember, we might be able to ask AI to help us do the scoring of the leads based on whatever our criteria is that comes out of that assessment. And then lastly, it may be able to give us some follow-up recommendations. All right. Now, when we've reached this point, this is huge. Now, all of a sudden, we've got potential roles for AI in this process to help us to be more efficient, more productive, right? We want to ask, what can AI do that would be like an action that has to be taken as part of this process? So an easy one for us to think about is at some point, we need to be putting this information into our CRM. We're lead scoring. Like, if we go through all this work and we don't put it in Salesforce or HubSpot or wherever, it's like, if a tree falls in a forest, does anybody hear it? Right? Right? So the question is, like, somebody's got to do that. Can it be AI? Can it be AI that does this? Right? What about calendar management? Right? These are all things that AI can do. It can input data into a CRM. It can establish calendar invites. It can generate emails and send emails. Right. It can do reporting updates and send those updates to the appropriate people. Right. So these are all actions. Again, we don't just sort of think about them in our head. We actually, enumerate them. We list them like we're doing here because we want to add those to the diagram. And if we look here, I've tagged these with actions. You can see here, calendar management is a part of scheduling. Down here with the handoff decisions, there's a reporting update. Maybe, the SRD, the sales rep is like saying, this is somebody who's really good. I've gone through the prospecting. We've lead scored them, and we're going to hand it off to an account executive who's going to take over. And these are the recommendations that we have. And this gets automatically done, generated, and then done and delivered by the generative AI agentic system. We've got CRM data right here, the record updates going to the CRM. We've got email sequencing, et cetera. And we're just putting them in the diagram approximately where we think they are relevant or they're germane. Then we make a pass at this point and we say, okay, fresh eyes. Maybe we go for coffee, we have lunch, whatever. We come back, we're fresh. And we go, let's do another pass against our diagram and just think about refining where the location of the outputs, those sort of cognitive tasks and cognitive AI actions, where do we think, can we refine that a little bit, right? And so when we come back in here, we start drawing a few more lines, we have a few more sequences. So some of these things like, here, discovery, of the conversation scheduling, where we know we've got a scheduling, we've got an action. Oh, there it goes to calendar. So you see, this is almost like a little mini process within the process, right there, right? And we're doing this all over the place. Handoff decisions, the follow-up recs, the next recommendation, deliverable that happens. Right? We've moved our deliverable from the back end here saying, well, where does this actually get produced? It gets produced from the qualification scoring that AI Cognitive is helping us produce. So you see what I'm doing is I'm laying out, I'm getting more refined in terms of what this flow looks like, but it's been an incremental series of sort of techniques or steps to get to this diagram. When I get to this diagram, I have a lot of information. Yep. I have the business processes mapped. I actually have an incredible number of places where I can start to experiment and prototype and validate that AI can be actually assistive, can help me with this business process. See what I mean? Yep. So this is like a huge step forward, I think, for a lot of us to get to this type of place. Agreed. And that's that spot right there. There's still more to do. there's still more to do with this, but just to get to here is huge, for today. Does this make sense so far?
Yeah, this is the promise of agentic AI, basically.
Yes.
Is to be able, like, so if any of you have ever built any kind of even just traditional like workflows, this is like every system basically this is kind of what it looks like in general, like to include our EverWorker system as well, is that you can actually start to map these out in an actual workflow such as this, where what I've traditionally seen is people just don't necessarily, if you've never seen a workflow like this before, you've never thought about it, of course you're not going to know how to implement it. So like everyone right now is talking about the MIT study that there's no actual, real ROI behind AI and business and things like that. And what we're really finding is that, sure, the reason that that's showing up is because people don't know how to think about it. They don't know how to implement it in the first place. Whereas this, which you just broke down, is like an actual system, step by step.
It's a method
of what you can do to then at the end, you have this workflow, which immediately what my mind thinks of with this is how with our EverWorker creator now, you can just, talk in normal human language. You could almost answer all those questions, copy, paste it into the EverWorker creator and say, make this.
Yes.
And
yes.
It goes up and actually makes it. So you don't even have to know how to code. You don't have to know any of that, but you've done the hard part basically of making it a system to follow. So yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, I think that, like, very well said. I think that the key is like we work in a world. I'm a musician and I play electric instruments. This is kind of a story here that's relevant to this, but I play instruments that are essentially analog. They're stringed instruments. I plug them in. Think of like amplifiers, all that kind of stuff. But now there's all this sort of like technology where you have these sort of digital emulators of amplifiers and things like that. But what you need to have between your analog musical instrument and your laptop or whatever, electronic device that you're using that emulates whatever these things are, it simulates these analog amplifiers, is you need an analog to digital transformer, right? A little box or something that takes the analog signal and captures it and transforms it into digital. What we're doing here is somewhat similar. We're taking all this information that runs around in all of our heads that's analog as business folks that work within a company, and we're starting to put it down on paper in a systematic way. And as we put it down on paper, digital paper here, it becomes a form which, just like you said, we can then hand off to a system like EverWorker or other types of systems that do that can then ingest that, because now it's not in our heads. It's actually in a form that the AI systems that build AI systems can consume and turn around and output hopefully a helpful agentic system for you.
And Doug, this is even like even just outside of our system. And all this is like, let's say the traditional also problem that people are having with implementing AI is the whole premise is business person over here, for the most part, conceptually knows these in their head, obviously, because they do the work every day, but then translating it, let's say traditionally, over to your IT team or your AI team. And you're trying to teach the AI team how to think about your job without actually any structure. So then they come up with a pilot or a prototype to bring back to you, and then you're like, this is nothing like what I was saying in the first place, because you're playing a weird game of telephone between two groups and without a system behind it. So like even just in general, thinking about this, like if you're at a large organization, no matter what, you're gonna have to figure this out. You have to know these skills, even just to get them to your IT team, no matter where you are.
Absolutely. And, even like what I'm doing here, as I mentioned earlier, is like when you look at business process modeling, that whole world, object-oriented design, all these different things, they actually have very strict ways to create diagrams. And the reason why they have strict ways to create diagrams is so that everybody's speaking in the same visual language.
Yeah. Yep.
To your point a minute ago, it's like if you this is a very stylized diagram, and it's good enough, right? Like, but the key is that you would go to the rest of your teams and you would say, this is how we're going to diagram things. Or maybe we actually want to go and, pick one of those, actual formal modeling. I think that you have to be careful when you go down the world of like business process modeling or object or any of those things, because it's like turtles all the way down. That's the way I would say it. It gets very complicated. And then all of a sudden you're worried too much about, you're back where we were in the early 2000s, where we like overdid it. We overthought the world, so that's why I say I would just give guidance, is that you should only use, like, if this diagram is useful enough for you and your team, like the way I've done it right here, that's it. Because that's the litmus test. Is it useful for you to articulate things and get you to the point where you can start thinking about like how to build agentic systems? Yep. That's the litmus test, right? If you need a little bit more, fine. You agree with it within your teams, and you figure out what that is in terms of your diagramming and your formal process. The point is that at the end of the day, it's like, what gets you from a blank page, not knowing where to go, but you need to go, to actually getting you to go and experiment and to actually find value with some of these things. That's all. That's the litmus test.
That's even, and I was even just thinking about it again of like, there's probably even a subset of people that would then look at this and say, well, what software are you using, Doug? How can I build these workflows? And it's like, my initial thought is like, for anyone that is watching this, that is already even thinking, how can I make this workflow? But then the overanalyzation in your brain is going off. You could even just write it, just draw it on a piece of paper. You could do it in PowerPoint. It's like, connect these things. It doesn't, obviously it's just for you to understand the process to go down to it.
Yes.
So what you said is so good, of like the overanalyzation, and we have this tendency to do that. And the thing that will work now is action. Do something now.
Yes.
This now, whether that just means drawing it or whatever system that you like to basically build a box, put an arrow to another box, put an arrow to another box, whatever gets you moving now.
Whatever gets you moving. I mean, you could do this, if you think about it, which is I've done these types of sessions before, where you literally in a room with 4 or 5 people and you have a whiteboard and you have sticky notes of different colors. And what we're looking at is a whiteboard with sticky notes, and we're just drawing lines, and we're brainstorming out what these processes are.
Exactly.
That's huge. And then take a photograph. Just take a photograph at the end. Poof, you've documented it. You've got it, right?
Yep.
And that's fun. And actually, you can get incredible, valuable insights when you bring together people that you loosely know are part of an extended workflow. Because a lot of our workflows, if you think about it in our businesses, like, you're in a different department than I am in EverWorker, right? But we work together on certain projects. And so if we were in the same room with 2 or 3 other people as part of a big project, and we're just brainstorming this out, the nuances and the details that we get are gold.
Yep. That's exact. And like the thing that we even mentioned earlier, like, let's say you take a picture of it or a screenshot wherever you're doing it.
Yep.
All these AI systems have, OCR inside of them now. Yeah, they're multimodal. So you could literally just be like, here it is, write out now, answer these what, when, when, how. I'll answer those questions for me based off of this. And once again, it becomes part of that loop of
a conversation. You're co-collaborating and designing and refining it. I mean, I've done that with my education processes. I mean, a lot of if you look at my processes for building training and education, they are enormous flowcharts. Like I have deliverables. I have to produce slides. I have to produce videos. I have to produce exercises. I have to produce quizzes. I have to all these different things are deliverables with a whole bunch of inputs. And then there's a whole bunch of steps along that way. And then the question is like, how can I use AI to help me think and produce, analyze, make those deliverables, right? And right, it's just once you do that, it's like it's not so daunting to think about how AI and you can test your assumptions at a specific point in a workflow about whether AI can be helpful to you to think or to do an action. You can literally test it and see if it actually meets the expectations that you want. Once you've mapped it and you've produced it, something like a diagram with descriptions, right?
Yep. And this inherently has the idea of, okay, since if you follow all these steps, by the end, you'll have, even as conceptually or literally, a flow chart that like we said, can be translated into a literal workflow, which is, which becomes agentic AI in the first place, which then takes to the idea of, you mentioned before, and, for the sake of time, obviously we're not going to go into it, but there are further steps. What would be that next step after you finish it?
Okay. So let's look at what right now we're looking at the lead qualification process, and what we've got in there is we've got the core steps, we've got the inputs and the outputs. Core steps right in the middle, the inputs and the outputs are the reds. All the green stuff in here, those are somehow AI helping us. They're helping us think through things, or they're helping us do things, produce actions. One thing that we haven't done, which is absolutely critical, is to do some kind of systematic analysis of this flow and ask a simple question. Who decides? Who decides at any given step or any deliverable or any action, or who decides whether or not this thing should occur or be in the world?
Absolutely.
And really what we're looking at here is that there's two groups that we can think of as deciding: humans or AI. And that's a binary choice in the sense that there may be certain things where AI, we say, oh, it's safe enough for AI to decide this, or this is a critical thing that our business will live or die off of, and we want to make sure a human is actually the final decision maker.
Right, exactly.
And then there's this place in the middle, because it really is a continuum between those two extremes. AI decides wholly or human decides wholly. Is AI may assist the human in making the decision. So it doesn't decide, but it somehow provides an analysis. It provides a recommendation. It provides some systematic way to assess whatever the landscape is that the decision exists within. And the human looks at it and goes, thank you very much. I'm going to, yes or no, right?
Yeah.
So that is not in this diagram. None of that is in here. We haven't identified decisions. But what we can do is we can apply a similar step-by-step methodological approach to actually identifying decisions. Now, we're not going to do that today, but I'd love to come back. We can talk about that. We can work through that. We'll build off of this. But I think people out there could imagine, oh, wow, yeah, okay. Yeah, like it's a question. Where in this workflow would decisions need to be made? And who are they? And how do I actually articulate those in a systematic way? Right? That's the next step.
And this is where people, I feel like I'm constantly online trying to also not downplay, but chill people out with the idea of, like, this is not like the whole point of this is to not end humanity in the first place. It comes to this is where that's pivotal, where the view of AI is just the end of all humanity, is the idea of that we just hand that decision to every decision off to AI, when a huge part of it, just as important, almost probably the most important part, is who should be in charge here. And obviously we as humans, we care about other humans, or at least we should. So there's going to be an inherent point at which we can then make the decision to, hand this off. No, don't hand this off. This is an important thing, which then the more you think about it, you're like, okay, if a human is making the decision to hand this off, for the most part, the human is not going to just hand over everything carte blanche and see you later, walk away. This is why it's important for you to learn about these things, to be an active participant in creating the future that we all want for our children, for us, for everybody, and the society that we want, is that you are an active participant in all of this, and that you understand where to hand things off, when to take things yourself, where's the human in the loop, how do I augment, all those things. It's all one giant equation with you at the middle.
Well, and if you coupled very tightly with an analysis of decision-making within our business processes, is who's accountable.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Because we work in organizations where the proverbial buck has to stop somewhere.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, if we don't have accountability, then if things go right or go wrong, we have no way of actually having ownership of those decisions. Accountability is about ownership. So,
Mhm.
you know, to your point with what you were saying a second ago, it's like, just strip away AI. Within organizations, we have already made decision making where it lies a core part of organizational structure, along with who's accountable for those decisions. That already exists.
Yep.
Yeah, we may not have, we've sort of written it down. We understand it. Who's a boss, who's works under the boss, who reports up. I mean, all those types of things are essentially organizational illustrations of decision making and accountability. So what we're saying is, let's just be, what's the word I'm looking for? Let's be conscious about how we approach AI.
Yep.
We have to map that out, understand first how humans do that, and then how we can then potentially identify points where AI can participate in that in some form.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yep. That automatically makes me think of, actually, I'm going to jump back to right here, is the whole idea of the AI workforce in general, is that, like you just said, it always has been a natural hierarchy of business. Obviously, you're not having the janitor be the CEO, or the junior business associate be the CEO, make the CEO's decisions, vice versa. And so there is a natural hierarchy that inherently needs to be there. And the same thing goes with an AI workforce, is now that what Doug was showing in his diagrams is like, there are certain points where AI will be in the loop. Now there's AI in the loop, but then when it comes down to what is an AI workforce, is that there's an entire team, theoretically, of, in this case, when you were looking at sales, there's a whole sales organization of AI workers below that are working in conjunction with your whole actual human human sales team as well. So you can start to realize, like Doug was showing, where does AI fit? Where did the humans fit? How can they work together? And especially, how can AI augment the human side of work? Because that's obviously what we care about, and what will actually bring about change. But that immediately made me think of the idea of the AI workforce here. But Doug, what I want to jump over, since we're running out of time here, is I would love for you to talk a little bit about our free course. So for everyone that's watching right now, we have a free course, the AI Fundamentals for Business Professionals, that all of you can take right now. You can see right here at the bottom, you can head over to workeracademy.ai, and Doug has created this course for all of you to take. So Doug, if you wouldn't mind, just take a few minutes to talk about what is this course.
Yeah. So, the title up at the top, AI Fundamentals for Business Professionals. So it was really interesting. Built this course about 4 months ago, just shortly after I had joined EverWorker back at the beginning of the year. And this course is designed for, we kind of have this sort of like, what you do is you build courses for a certain type of student. Student has certain skills they bring to the table, but they also want to learn certain skills for the course. So we call it kind of a persona. It's a certain audience that the course is designed for. And this course is designed for people that it's almost like you are a business professional. You do not code. You have some, chops that you've worked in an organization where you know how to handle maybe some systems. You can work within like CRMs or sort of legal systems or HR systems or whatever. You do your job. You're a subject matter expert, all that kind of stuff, but you don't code. And so what I try to do with this course is initially out of the gate, as I said, if you're using AI at all, you're using it as in a way that I would call, or well, the industry calls almost like a consumer, an AI consumer. You're not an AI engineer. You're not building agentic systems. You're not coding agentic systems. Therefore, what you do is you use like a chatbot, like ChatGPT or Claude's interface or something like that. What I did is I said, let's rip open how those chatbots are actually built. Let's think about like what it would mean to sort of build those ourselves. And the reason why we did that out of the gate was we wanted to get people who are AI consumers who don't code, because at that point, really, you're looking at, you can either consume AI, or if you want to build it, you have to learn how to code. Well, that's no longer the case, especially with things like EverWorker, right? You have the option to actually build it. But in order to build it, you actually have to kind of understand some of the key parts of what the system is made out of. Not to code it, just enough so you conceptually understand it. That's what this course went after. And in a way, it's a later course than what I was just describing to you a minute ago. A minute ago, it was almost like before you even get to that point, you might want to start mapping out your business processes and models, modeling it out and all that. And then when you go and you start looking at how to build like a chatbot that can help you in your work, or build an agentic system where you have multiple kinds of things going on, this course starts to get you into that world. It starts to build out, no pun intended, build out the ability for you to start creating or building AI systems. That's what this course is going to do. Now, I've had people take the course, which has been hugely gratifying, where they come out of it and all of a sudden their mind is just opened up. They go, oh my goodness, I'm no longer sort of boxed in being a consumer of a chatbot interface. I have these ideas about what I can do. It starts to get them thinking about what their business processes are and how AI could sort of start working. So it's a part of that picture that we've been painting over the last hour. That course is online. You can see it down below, workeracademy.ai. If you go there, you register, you can go through the course, as Austin was saying, and then at the end of it, you can grab a course completion certificate, and then you can, post it on LinkedIn, ping us, let us know how you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If there's any feedback, I love to hear feedback. How could it be better? And know that course is one of many. The stuff that I was just showing you, that's going to be another course. So there's a lot of different courses that we're going to sort of round out this sort of educational journey for people, here at EverWorker Academy. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, Doug, thank you so much for all of this, man. I hope that everyone here that is watching, this is going to be obviously on our YouTube and on our LinkedIn, and I'll send out a follow-up email as well with the recording, is that I encourage you all to go back and go through the steps at which Doug actually took us through. And at the same time, Doug, I'll even just mention this to you, and then whoever is interested, for me as well. If you want, let's say, those steps, we can always send them to you as well. I mean, obviously we do is copy and paste, and we can send you the document. So for anyone that's interested in what we went over and actually implementing that now, which I encourage everyone, obviously that should be a part of what you're doing, is just let us know. You like we said in the beginning, we're all just humans talking to you. You can find us easily on LinkedIn and our website, YouTube, wherever it is, and you can very easily interact with us. So thank you very much for everyone that has joined. We're going to have another session next week. Obviously, every Wednesday we do these sessions. Please make sure to go to our LinkedIn, follow us there, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and just follow along with all the work that we're doing, where we're going to show you also more of our EverWorker V2 product, where you can actually implement these things that Doug was showing into your real workflows. So Doug, thank you very much for joining us today. This was super beneficial for everybody. And I look forward to interviewing you again about the next steps, and then the next steps even further from there. So thank you for leading us in the AI education journey.
Oh, you're welcome, Austin. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone, thank you again, and we will see you next time.
Simply describe what you need, and Creator collaborates with you to understand every detail. No technical knowledge required. If you know the work, you can create the worker. Watch as Creator builds your AI worker in real time, configuring data sources, setting up analysis engines, and creating integrations. Your competitive intelligence specialist is now working around the clock, delivering insights your team needs to stay ahead. Now your team can get instant competitive intelligence whenever they need it. Ready to create your AI workforce?